So I'm going to be presenting today about the DAG, the Directed Acyclic Graph. I have some notes over here so I don't forget what I want to say. So let me share my screen. All right, can you guys see this cool picture of pipelines? Yeah. All right. So you guys might be familiar with this feature we have called pipelines. You might use them every single day. Originally, the way pipelines work is that they executed by stage. So every job in a particular stage needed to be complete before you could run the next stage. Recently, thanks to some really awesome work by a bunch of our backend engineers, we now have the ability to create DAG pipelines, which are directed acyclic graphs. And what that means is that instead of the pipeline executing stage by stage, you can use the needs keyword and indicate that a job can start operating as soon as it's the things that it depends on, which aren't the same thing as the dependencies keyword, but as soon as the thing that it depends on is finished running, it can also run. And you see that in our pipelines, right? Like if you look, you'll be like, oh, test is still running while compile is still running. So that's really cool. But the way that our pipeline page looks, as you can see here, it's really hard to see what the dependencies of a job are, what the graph looks like. You just have like all of these different rows and like everything is connected to everything. So what we've been working on is creating a visualization of pipelines that are directed acyclic graphs, so that when you write your file, especially if you're making a very complex file, you might not know all the paths that you're including. When you're like, oh yeah, this needs this, you can sort of lose track of where everything is. So the idea is, how do we visualize that? The first way that we talked about visualizing it was using this Tangled Tree visualization. This is just an example from the D3, from a D3 notebook. And you can see, right, it's sort of like, it has these nice little nodes and they all come together. And this is a really cool graph. Unfortunately, it's not a default D3 layout. So basically, it's very hard. The way D3 works, the way that DataViz works in like a short sense, right, is you have a bunch of data and then you have to tell a browser how to draw a picture with all of that data. And the APIs for drawing pictures in browsers are really low level. It's like, put this thing literally at this place. So our problem is, okay, how do we draw this without taking a year to draw this? And I want to call out that Peyton and Fred spent a lot of time looking at our data and trying to figure out how to draw it this way. And it was hard. It was really, really hard. There's all sorts of edge cases and things. And when I joined the project, I've done a little bit of D3 before, and I said, okay, instead of trying to make this right away, what if instead, classic zoom in the way of my tabs, there we go. What if instead we made a Sankey? Now, when you first look at this, it might not be like, oh yes, obviously I can see how this graph is exactly like the graph you showed me before, Sarah. But the way that it works in D3, a lot of the data it uses to lay these nodes out are useful for maybe in the future getting to the Tangled Tree, and they handle the sort of hierarchy of nodes that we need for a DAG. The thing that makes it difficult compared to a lot of other data visualizations is that jobs can have multiple parents and multiple children, and that really narrows the level of data visualizations that you can use. Even most hierarchical views presume that there is a single parent, and that's not the case. So we said, okay, how can we make this Sankey look as much like what we want that Tangled Tree as possible? And then can we keep iterating to get it closer and closer? Also, right, we wanted to be able to get this out in front of users because we only know so much about what people's data looks like. And we can generate things and we can like try to uncover little edge cases, but having worked with any data, I can promise you it looks totally different than you expect, no matter what you expect, because people are like amazing and inventive and things will happen. So getting it out so that people can see it is really important. So what we made is this. This is the first pass of a DAG pipeline. And this project, right, went from the design and figuring out how we wanted to use the graph, as well as working with the back end to figure out what kind of data we can get about graphs. And so this is what we have right now. It's laid out, it's very cute. If you hover on this link, it'll tell you what this link is. In this case, it's maybe less exciting. In a case like down here, where you're like, oh, what is this link connected to? you can see that. You also might want to say, how many jobs are leading me to, say, this final point? So we can click on it, and now you can see all of the jobs that are required to pass before production D is called. And so this is obviously another example piece that we did. It's not like the real data. Oh, right. The next thing I wanted to talk about with this is, so this is what we have. We can look at the things. Something that's very interesting is you'll notice that the first step towards getting closer to that previous graph is being able to draw our links the way that we've drawn them, right? If we look at this in the Sankey, it has all these like swoopy links, which are nice, but not the aesthetic we're going for. So instead, we made these cool little blocked links with the midpoints, and it's less important maybe, or less obvious in this one. In this one, you can see a little bit more that an important thing that we needed to do with these links is to make sure that they're all staggered so that they're not sitting on top of each other when you draw the graph out. And on the recommendation of Andrew, I thought I would show you guys a little bit of code real fast to talk about, even with D3 giving us a lot of data, making something custom can take a lot of work. So this is literally the very exciting math code that tells you, and a like little essay comment I wrote about it so that when I or anyone else comes back in 6 months, we have a vague idea of what the heck is going on in here. So even just to make these points, right, we have to go through and find like where each node is sitting, and then we scatter these points along. But we have to make sure that as we scatter them along, if they become too far on this side or too far on this side, we can move back around. I also use a little bit of randomness, which is like I like to think of as SVG drawing magic. You can see over here this math.random, and that makes it so that nodes that might sit all at one end, because as you're going around the edge, right, you get different nodes. They don't all sit on top of each other. I guess I don't have a really good example in these, but they don't sit all on top of each other. So that was a really fun thing. Another very fun, like low-level SVG problem you have to solve is how to do these labels. This also has lots and lots of code behind it to try to figure out where the label is and keep it from overlapping the line too much. You can see here that nothing is perfectly possible. That when you have data, some things just happen. So staging C is overlapped, but overall, that's also custom code to make sure our labels are showing up. With SVGs, it's a really interesting problem that I'm happy if people want to learn more about it technically to talk about. But basically, you can't wrap code in a cat wrap code. You can't wrap text in SVGs. So all of these labels are a correct length. But if we jumped into another one, I don't think I have an example of it. The titles can be any length you want, right? We're talking about data again. People can put in whatever they want. So we actually like inject divs into SVGs. Like you have this SVG and then you create a new context and you're like, okay, now this is regular HTML again. And those are like the kinds of problems that we solve to get labels that can wrap and look good, which I think is really interesting. So I did want to show you one more very exciting DAG that I've hidden here because I didn't want to accidentally click on it. And this is what the GitLab pipeline MR looks like as a directed acyclic graph. So you can see it's very, very exciting. Coverage front end is the test that needs the most jobs. I think if I will that work, yeah, there we go. You can see it has like it's waiting on the most, and then we can click on something like set of tests and see how that's done. So this also brings us up, though, to an interesting problem that we were even unaware of with some of the other ways we viewed the graphs, which is you can plausibly have a link where neither end of that link is visible on the graph at the same time when you scroll. But given the layout, it is not possible. So our next step, and you can see sort of a hint of it here, this was in the sort of pre-work, is going to be adding annotations, so that you can click on links and click on paths and the users can sort of hold their whole annotation in front of them. And that will be the next step. And once we have the annotations ready, hopefully by the end of 13.1, we will also have a little beta tag asking users to come to an issue and tell us about their DAGs, tell us about their weird DAGs, tell us what they love, tell us what they hate, tell us what's broken, because we can only guess so much. And I'm actually super excited to hear about that and to keep iterating on different ways to make our pipelines comprehensible to our users, because I think this is like so cool and so interesting, and it's such a core of what sets us apart. And also I like putting weird math in the front end. So it's basically everything I could look for. Thank you guys for listening.
That was awesome. Thank you so much for that.
I think you're okay. I guess I can present now. I didn't know if you were taking questions async or.
I mean, yeah, whatever is easier. I can take questions now too.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Sarah? Or?
Okay. I actually have a question. I know where we've been. Thanks for showing, by the way, Sarah. I think this is amazing work and indeed beautiful. And as I said in the comments, I love the iterative thinking here, and I love what you said, that you're kind of like trying to implement the solution, and then you're going to be like also at the same time checking in with people and seeing like what else could we take into account here. A question, I know that earlier we have started from the beautiful, was it D3, right, graph for the DAG visualization. And I know that you worked with Dimitri a lot on that. Curious, what is the collaboration with the product designer right now looks like? Is there anyone involved? Would you like to have more support there?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was a very interesting process. I think Dimitri kind of went on vacation and then he came back and I was like, hi, I changed everything we're building. So that went really well. And I highly recommend doing that when you work with designers. Nothing bad ever happens when you do that. So we've gone back and forth, and like right now, I think I know where our aim is, but right now I've been focused on getting this first step out. And then I think with either Dimitri or with our new designer, I'm hoping there will be more tinier iterations to be like, okay, this is what we have, this is what we've heard, now how can we, once we have this like nice base surface, I think it will be really fun to like do the smaller iterations.
Yeah, definitely. And I will make sure that we try to be more helpful there, as we now have a stable counterpart on the design side. We have talked with Darby and with Cheryl a little bit about the iterative design, and we will be trying to be a better partner there in the future. But great work. Thanks so much for sharing. And yeah, looking forward to see this going forward.
Thank you. Yeah, I do think we could have done a more, like looking backwards on this, I think a good learning is we could have done a more iterative design, even to the level of being like, we did an iteration office hours, the CI team, and we talked about this too. And I think one of the things that would be good would have been not even drawing a graph first, like making a list of the nodes and being like, this is what we can do. And like, making some like nice little rectangles around those nodes to see what kinds of questions people were answering, and like, even building from there could have been an interesting way to do it. Like, I love this graph, so I'm not like sad we did it this way, but I think that's a way that it could have been also a little bit more iterative. I noticed too that Sean asked how we write tests for this, which is a very good question. Let me see if I can grab the spec really fast. And I might be able to pop this back up on here, share screen. I don't know how useful it is to look at the code, but I'm going to show you anyway. So the most important way that I've sort of fallen down to testing it is this is a case where we use the, where we actually use snapshots. I'm not always a huge fan of HTML snapshots, just because they can be really brittle. A snapshot, for folks who don't do this every day, basically, there's a way to write a test where you say, mount this component, pretend like it's in the DOM, just this like little section of it, and now save a file that just has all the text of the HTML of the code that renders this. And then every time we run tests again, it checks the new version against the version that it saved, and it's like, did this change? And we ended up using that because SVGs can be very hard to sort of like look into programmatically, and sometimes things can seem to render, but if a number isn't a number anymore and it's like a nan, then SVG won't necessarily fail, but it's not what you want to have happen. So we use snapshots for that. And then the other thing is I just sort of look into like, are there as many linear gradients, which is the color for that link, as there's links in my parse data. Same with like nodes and labels. So a lot of it is counting. And then likewise, there's actually this whole other universe of parsing the data when it comes from the back end that I didn't even talk about. That again, if somebody wants like a technical run through of this parsing, I'm super happy to do again. But so in this case, we're literally sometimes just checking that the node structure comes out with the properties we want. I think it's a little bit imperfect, but I think it's pretty good. And when I wrote the tests, I found some bugs, so they're definitely working correctly.
It's so awesome, Sarah. Thanks for explaining that, by the way, about the snapshots. So will this be, when will this, you know, hit production?
Hopefully by the end of 13.1. So I've been doing many tiny MRs. I think I'm on like, if we count the backend MRs that Fabio also did, I feel like we're on like MR like number 9 or 10 or something at this point. It's a bunch of small pieces. So like I did the MVC and the proof of concept work that we worked on, and then I've been moving it over in chunks and making the code more production ready. So there's 2 left. There's the interactions one, which I'm in the middle of working on, which I demoed for you. And then there'll be the annotations one. Hopefully that'll flip in 13.1. If annotations don't go, I think it's worth having a discussion whether we still want to send the graph. It's sad because if things are really tall, then you might not know what you're looking at. But if that's, you know, a 2% case and, you know, we can still get 98% of people looking at it, it might be worth doing that, I think.
Yeah, not everyone's graphs are probably as complex as GitLab's.
All right, I think that's it. I went over the recommended 15 minutes by only 2 minutes. I think that's not so bad. And now Peyton is going to talk more about pipelines, about different new other exciting pipeline features we're making. Peyton just texted and says his Zoom dropped. So I think maybe we can give him a minute or 2 and see if it will come back. Otherwise, I don't think I can also demo that because I don't think I don't know if it's from behind the feature flag in production, although it might be.
Yeah, I think it's fine to give him a minute, Sarah. What maybe another question, if you don't mind, Sarah. Yeah, on the visualization there, which was really cool, by the way. Thanks for sharing that. It was awesome. Looking at it now, what would you do differently now that you've got to where you are if you were going to go back and start this again?
That's a very good question. I definitely think, like I said before, I would have gone back to doing sort of just like representations as rectangles. Like, can we display this data? What does it look like? Because even answering that question opened a whole bunch of other ones, you know, and be like, great, what's the question we want to answer? Great, we don't necessarily have to show every relationship. We can just show like a generation 0 job, a generation 1 job, a generation 2 job, and sort of like see those stack up. I think that's the biggest thing I would change. The other decision I made that I think is the right one, but if I had like infinite time, I might have like tried both versions, is the way we're doing this with D3 and Vue is that, so D3 and Vue both operate on the DOM, and they're both written to operate that way, right? Like they're not necessarily meant to go together, or they don't think about how they would interact. So we've chosen to do it with like a Vue shell and then mostly D3 operating the DOM, partly too, because since Vue puts watchers on every object you add into the DOM through Vue, I think it saved us a lot of performance headache to use D3 because we're not like instantiating Vue objects with all of their getters and setters on it. But I would have been interested. It does mean that there's a certain amount of like managing how you're referring to pieces that you don't have in Vue, and I would be interested to see what that would look like architecturally if I like did it both ways. So I don't think it was the wrong decision, but it's a decision I would like to have time to dig into more. But I think seeing how people use it is sort of more important than the like code structure, much to my disappointment, because I love thinking about the code structure forever, but we should probably show it to people.
That's a really good answer. Thank you very much for that. What I find interesting in your answer is like I always wondered about this myself. When you get to a point, you're like, oh man, I wish I'd done this thing or that thing. But I'm also hearing your discussion on performance considerations around implementation, and that's like I'm lining that up with the career matrix that I'm working on and thinking about how people think about these things. So thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it. Peyton says that his internet is flaky. Did he make it back on yet? I'm not sure he'll be able to. Yeah, it looks like maybe just check in with him and see if he's going to make it back on. If not, we'll probably just end it here unless someone else wants to randomly demo something cool.
I just want to give a shout out to Daniel for always taking such amazing notes. Having tried to help out this time, my fingers hurt and my brain is like 5 minutes behind now. So
Yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead, Sarah. Sorry.
I was going to say something not about notes. So you should say the notes thing and then I'll say it.
I was just going to laugh at that, you know, getting in the habit. And once you get in the habit, it gets easier. But go ahead, Sarah.
I had one other shout out for this, of course, which is actually for Andrew. He reminded me. So something that I think has been really, really successful about this project is that as a team, we worked really closely on it, which means that like I've had Fred and Andrew working with me on getting the MRs through and making and giving me my reviews and doing very thorough, very good ones. But it's been, I think, a great example of the process that like we took this big chunk of work and said, okay, we are going to be the people who know how all of this works right now and like keep building on it. And I think that it would have been a lot harder to do our like 10,000 MRs if we didn't have some like consistent, really helpful reviewers. For the big chunk, Andrew and I actually even did a phone call, which I kind of recommend. That I was like, all right, you haven't written a lot of D3. Let's just take an adventure through the code together and spend an hour looking at it. And I thought that was really helpful too.
yeah, I think it was really insightful to actually step through all of the fun math that was going on. And I do kind of sort of maybe have a grasp on how it all works now.
Peyton's back.
Hey, yeah, sorry. I don't know if I should probably keep my video off. Does that typically help with internet connection? It does? Okay. All right, so is it my go? Okay. Let's see here. Can everyone see my calendar? Is that okay? All right.
You need more meetings, Peyton.
No, I do not. Okay, so in 13.0, we released pipeline filters. This is probably not as exciting as Sarah's, but it was a well sought after feature. In the first iteration, we released trigger author and branch name. So you can filter by trigger author such as SID and a branch of whatever, whatever the branch may be. In the next iteration, we are introducing status, which I have an open MR on that. So we'll be able to filter by status and kind of get more granular on what we're actually filtering by, and also by tag name. So that's a get tag. So that's pretty cool as well. Kind of how it works behind the scenes is we render the first 20 trigger authors on load, and then each subsequent trigger author. So like if you're going to search for Peyton, like each keystroke actually is, let's try that again so we can see it. Each keystroke is actually delayed with debounce and low dash. So for performance reasons, we're searching each keystroke to find out where the user is. And that's really important to have an API that supports search. It allows us to do things like this without rendering way too many branches, users, or anything like that. We're actually working on some performance improvements. It's decent right now, but not the best. So backend's actually got a few MRs open that will allow us to do this a little faster. And I've also proposed that we take away the tabs at the top to maybe improve some performance a little bit more. That hasn't been decided yet, but that'll allow us to not, you know, especially when status is released, we won't have redundant filters. And what all makes this possible is the sweet GitLab UI component, filtered search. And then so you pretty much use this for your tokens and the styling and everything. And then as far as like the actual implementation of filtering and anything to actually make it work is done on the implementation side. And that's my quick little demo of pipeline filters.
Cool. I have a question, Peyton, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
What was the consideration towards creating a separate tag filter versus kind of combining the tags and branches into a broader Git reference search?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think it was a UX decision because it actually is a little hard on the implementation side because branch and get tag actually both use the ref query parameter. So you can't have, if I had the tag branch open, it'll probably take me a while to get that open, but with tag name, like we kind of have to hide branch name if tag name is selected, you know, because we can't have two ref parameters. But I assume probably that, say if you came to branch name and you wanted to render the first 20 branches and also the first 20 tags, or, you know, like how do you handle that in the UI? Like would we break it up with, you know, maybe like branch up here at the top and then down halfway down like tag? And then like you have to use one API to find branches and tags. So you'd have to handle input from the user and still make two API calls to return the data for that. So I don't know how performant that would be.
Interesting. Thanks.
Yeah.
So I had the next question, Peyton. I just was wondering if you wanted to talk actually a little bit about how you broke up this project, because I think the original issue is really big, and then what the plans are for sort of the next steps.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So if I can actually find the, okay. Yeah, so let me find the epic. Okay, so originally the epic was pretty huge to all introduce it into one milestone. That was like, or it used to just be an issue, not an epic. So it was trigger author, pipeline status, trigger source, branch name, tag name. And when I was looking at this, I was like, yeah, that's going to be super hard to do in one milestone. So what we did was promoted this to an epic, and then we introduced trigger author and branch name, which were the most sought after filters. And then we looked into doing pipeline status and tag name in the next iteration. And trigger source isn't supported from backend yet. So we'll need to get that in place before we actually put that into effect. And everything for this is currently behind a feature flag. So we can, if anything goes wrong, you know, we can flip it back really quick. But so far so good. I haven't heard any bugs or anything like that. Only thing is we got a few internal performance questions that we had some concerns about. Like we were getting anywhere from like 5 to 6 seconds network response on a few of the bigger queries. So backend's kind of looking into that to see how we can manage that with pagination and more performant queries.
And maybe GraphQL. Will GraphQL fix that too, Peyton? No, I'm just teasing.
Yeah, for sure, probably. Yeah, I'm hearing GraphQL is pretty sweet for pagination. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Stop share. And sorry about the video drop. I don't know. I don't know if it's having the little ones home and they're watching YouTube and stuff, or I don't know what's going on.
When you say video drop, I'm like picturing the mic drop, you know. You finish your presentation, they're just like.
I think that would be Sarah's presentation. That was pretty good.
Yeah, I might agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
I don't want to say you shouldn't do it. Cool, that was awesome. Does anyone else have any other questions for Peyton? Cool. We're kind of like pretty early, and I don't mean to be stepping in here, but I guess I'm wondering if people feel like this format is good. And while we're like people that are interested to hear, do we have any suggestions on how we might change or any thoughts there? Also, everyone's saying thank you to both of you, and I'm changing the subject already, so thank you both for doing that. That's awesome. Much appreciated.
I think this is an amazing format. It really helps you to see what work is actually being done, like kind of like hear the real story behind that. It's really, really helpful for me. So really appreciate these sessions. I wish we could have the same in other stage groups as well.
Cool.
So what happens if no one has anything to demo? You just skip it?
Cancel it. I tried to account for that. Well, I don't want to say there's a lot of people that have been trying to set this stuff up. So we tried to account for that by saying, like, if we don't see anything in the agenda a couple of hours before the meeting, just skip it. We want to be as flexible as we can and be very careful about the synchronous time we're using, because it's nice to chat with everyone. That's awesome. But like maybe people want to do other things with their real focused time with sync time. So I don't really mind if people want to do something different. I thought I saw something in the handbook ages ago if we didn't have questions up like 9 hours before or something. I forget where that was though. It's that whole, my brain tells me something about the handbook that may or may not be true kind of situation.
I really like this format. I was happy to get to come this time and to see. I always want to see what other people are working on too. Just because too, our product is so big, even our feature area, that like knowing what other people are working on tells me a lot. Like I always learn something about how our product works too. I want to see some back-end demos though. You guys should do demos, even if it's just like typing something in and something coming out in the Rails console. I think that still counts as a demo. And I want to know what's lurking in there. So I want you guys to show me what you're doing.
Front-end demo is always much cooler. It's like, yeah, I just spent 2 weeks on this, small amount of code. And front end is like, wow, look at this flashing, glowing thing.
No, I'm with Sarah, actually. I really appreciate just like a demo that's consisting of a terminal and just somebody frantically typing into it, seeing what happens.
Using Vim.
Who made the bin joke? I didn't see the screen flash up. Sorry. Trying to take notes on all the jokes. We got to get the jokes down in the notes. You know, that's important.
that was unfortunately me.
Oh, good job, Peyton. Love your work, mate.
Hey.
Sarah, I don't have any Emacs pedals quite yet, but I might, you know, I actually have a keyboard right here. I might repurpose the pedal I have attached to it.
All right. Don't have any Emacs pedals yet. Cool. I think we're good. Is everyone good with stopping the recording now? Yeah. Awesome.